You said I do over and over again.
Congressman, I disagree with everything you have said.
Well, I'm sure, but just answer the question.
I have to be honest and tell you, I'm not sure exactly what you do.
I'm not going to be wasting your time with this charade and circus.
My MAGA colleagues.
So give Bill Clinton a call.
Disgusting.
I think you're the most dishonest witness that has ever appeared before the Judiciary Committee.
Oh, so that's why there's 5,300 in the last 4 days that illegally tried to enter the country.
The border's not open.
So Sheriff Daniels is lying to us?
Apocalyptic fantasy.
You think COVID-19 caused attacks on cell towers?
A country without borders, sir, is not a country at all.
Mr. Secretary, is the number greater than 0? Can you tell us that? The number of people who've been encountered on the border, over the 2 million number, encountered on the border, put in removal proceedings, adjudicated, and then removed. Is that number greater than 0?
Yes.
Is it greater than 100?
Yes.
Greater than 1,000?
Congressman, Mr. Chairman, forgive me. Mr. Chairman, as I have stated before, the data that you wish to have, we will provide to you as promptly as possible. What I don't want to do is misspeak when it comes to data. I do not want to be inaccurate.
And I can appreciate that, but we have a history where we've asked questions before in a hearing. You told us the same thing and you don't get it back to us. So we're trying to get as much as we can on the record in a public hearing. And you've now told me it's greater than 100, but you don't know if it's greater than 1,000 out of the 2-point-something million who've come to the country, been encountered and put in removal proceedings. So we know it's greater than 100. You say you're going to get back with us, but the history has been not too good on your part in getting us those answers.
Mr. Chairman, of course it's more than 1,000. But what I want to assure you of, because
is it more than 100,000?
Because quite frankly, Mr. Chairman, we have been cooperative with this
No, you
committee.
haven't.
We have provided you with documents. We have provided you with data.
I can keep putting up the redacted documents, but you have not.
Mr. Secretary, I want to address some of the outlandish claims my colleagues have made and put them to rest at the outset of this hearing. My Republican colleagues claim that the border is open. Is the border open, Mr. Secretary?
No, it is not.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The border is not open, and to say so is not only false, but is really an insult to the brave men and women of the Border Patrol who work every day to keep us safe.
I've only got 25 seconds. I'll just say I don't have time for a question because you'll be elusive. But for the record, since we're stating things for the record, I've been in Congress 7 years. I think you're the most dishonest witness that has ever appeared before the Judiciary Committee. And I think I speak for a lot of my colleagues. This is such a frustrating exercise for us because our constituents want answers. They're tired of the open border. They're tired of people dying from fentanyl overdoses, and it's your fault. It's my time.
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
No, there's no point of order in the middle of this. This is my opinion. I think it's shared by millions of American people.
Based on the
and you show no shame.
Chairman, this is based on the standard that the chairman set out in previous hearings. Calling a witness dishonest is over the line that you drew at a previous hearing.
I'm not pulling the words down. That speaks for the American people.
If you put the American people first, you should refer back to Trump's border policies, but you won't because you hate him. You despise the man. So give Bill Clinton a call, and then he can help you with the border crisis. As President Clinton stated, we are a nation of immigrants, but we are also a nation of laws. You, sir, have betrayed constitutional order, neglected your duty, and violated the trust of the American people. And as a nation of laws, I look forward to your impeachment.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. As I said, you have a serious job. Border crossings are down despite my MAGA colleagues constantly saying we have an open border, which only invites people south of the border to believe that they should try and come here. They're rooting for that chaos. You are trying to bring solutions to stop that.
Are those sanctuary policies, as you define them, a threat to public safety?
So sanctuary policies are defined differently by different communities.
But to your definition,
if I may,
is it a threat to public safety?
I do not consider it in the service of public safety to release an individual into the community when that individual can be released to Immigration and Customs Enforcement for prompt removal.
Thank you. Do you oppose state policies that forbid local authorities from cooperating with ICE?
I am aware of some that I do oppose.
By definition, Mr. Secretary, if you're on the terrorist watch list, you represent a threat. So 140 people on the terrorist watch list so far this year. For the record, would you please give us the status of each of those individuals so we know what you did with people who were on a terrorist watch list, who were apprehended, many got away, but were apprehended, where they are today so that Congress can know?
Congressman, I would be pleased to provide you with that information with respect to the individuals encountered at the southwest border.
Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back, but could the Secretary answer that question? What is the status of those 140?
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Chairman, what is the
Point of order.
What authority or point of order?
Gentlelady, state a point of order.
Mr. Chairman, under what authority are you speaking right now? Whose time? Whose time is it? Are you being recognized for 5 minutes?
I was just asking what I thought would be a question
Mr.
every
Chairman,
single
it's
member
not-
of Congress would want to know. I'll do it on my time or someone else's time.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
He had asked the question, and there wasn't an answer to the status of the 140
Mr.
people
Chairman, that
apprehended
he
on
did.
the
The
terrorist
witness
watch list.
provided an answer, and if you want
I
to
don't
use
think
your
he did,
5
but
minutes,
I'll do it
I
on my
think
time.
that's
That's fine.
Thank
We
you.
recognize the gentlelady from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So would you say, having been asked this over and over again, that the United States, the President of the United States, the Secretary of Homeland Security, and all of the hardworking men and women at the border have operational control or have a form of presence, that they are aware of what's going on in the border and that they're working to secure the border every single day?
As we define that term, Congresswoman, we do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief and yield my time since I'm kind of wasting my time here. I'll be honest with you. Secretary Mayorkas, do you take full responsibility for all decisions of action or inaction made at your agency? Do you personally take full responsibility
For
all of the decisions made at your agency?
I am the Secretary of the Department.
So it means yes.
I bear ultimate responsibility for the decisions made.
Yes, okay. So you mentioned earlier that in your definition you have operational control of the border. Can you define what you mean by that?
What we mean, because under the Secure Fence Act, it means that not a single individual would cross the border. And under that definition, no administration has had operational control.
So what number do you have? 5 million, 10, if less than 5 or 10, or less than a couple 100,000 get away or more? I mean, what is your definition?
What we do, Congresswoman, is we
Do you have a number?
What we do is we look at the resources that we have available to us and ask ourselves, are we deploying those resources to achieve the most effective results for the American people? That is what we do, and we are hopeful, working with you and other members of this committee, to increase the funding for the Department of Homeland Security.
So fine, we hear funding, but I've been at the border and you've been at the border too. How would you grade your job on a scale of 0 to 10? How would you grade yourself?
Congresswoman, I am immensely proud to work.
How would you grade yourself?
Congresswoman, I am immensely proud to work with the men and women of the Department of Homeland
Security.
Security.
Your job, not all of the women. I'm sure there are a lot of great men and women in your department. How would you rate your job as the head of your agency?
It is the honor of my life.
From 0 to 10, so you cannot grade it. How would you grade your preparedness to this committee meeting on scale from 0 to 10? We ask information, you all these promises letter. I'm not wasting my time. I'm sorry, I don't want to use bad word, what you can do with all these letters, because we keep giving money and sending letter and you tell us BS back. So how would you rate yourself, your preparedness to this committee?
It is the honor of my lifetime to work with the men and
From
women.
scale 0 to 10, how would you say how prepared you came to this hearing?
I will repeat what I said.
So you're not answering any questions. You are not answering any Republican question. Is it something that your intent to not respond to any questions of Republicans, you came with that intent?
That is incorrect, Congresswoman.
Well, you're not answering any questions.
It is.
I mean, every time I hear you say, we will, we shall, yeah, I don't know. You don't know any numbers. You don't even know how many people you actually, you prosecuted, how many people you deported. You're nothing. How can you say you know how your department is run? As executive, you don't know these numbers?
Congresswoman, let me share with you.
Well, you haven't shared anything useful here.
Let me share
I'm
with you.
sorry to tell you, I'll yield to Chairman Jordan because I'm not going to be wasting your time with this charade and circus. You do not have an intent to do that. And it is a serious national security issue. This border and cartels are stronger. A lot of money NGOs are making who knows what, and probably a lot of corruption over there. And we have a national security crisis. And you sitting here and saying, looking at us with very smiley face, it's unacceptable. But I yield to Chairman Jordan.
A country without borders, sir, is not a country at all. A home without a roof and a home without doors, sir, is not a home at all. I have 3 young children at my home. They're all under the age of 4 years old. My home is secure because I lock it up every single night because I care about their safety. It's actually the #1 role of our federal government is to keep our citizens safe. I'm a combat veteran. I'm willing to give my life for that. West Point guy, flew Apaches in Baghdad, and safety is something that's paramount to me. It's actually the reason why I'm in this room right now is to figure out ways to keep our citizens safe. When you're at your home, sir, do you lock your doors?
Congressman, thank you very much for your service in our military. It's the highest form of service.
Thank you. Do you lock your doors at your home?
Congressman, I take care of the safety of my family.
Understood.
And we in the Department of Homeland Security work every day to protect the safety and security of the American people.
So you would agree that the American public should be afforded the exact same level of safety and security that you provide for yourself and your own family?
That is what 260,000 people dedicate their careers to.
Understood, sir. Can you tell me the number of unaccompanied minors who have crossed our southern border during your tenure as Secretary?
Very pleased to provide that data to you, Congressman.
Okay.
You cited a figure that was 50,000, and since you came in, it's been more than double every year. Who's responsible for that? Is it you and your policies, or is it President Biden? It's a simple thing. You don't want to answer it because you know it's you. You know it's your policies you're driving on. On October 27, 2021, you issued guidance that restricted the ability of ICE officers to arrest aliens in protected areas such as courthouses where they knew aliens to be. You thus made it more difficult and dangerous for ICE officers to go and enforce the law. These are people who had already had, and generally, many of them have already had their day in court. Did President Biden order you to issue that guidance?
Congressman, our policies are driven to protect the American people.
Who
safeguard.
Issued that policy? Was it the president? Are you following the president, or did you create the policy?
Congressman,
or will you ever give us an answer?
That is a policy.
Yield back. Disgusting.
Secretary, let me focus on CISA a moment and something very specific. Jen Easterly, the director of CISA, testifying before an appropriations subcommittee here in the House earlier this year, said, quote, "We don't flag anything to social media organizations at all. We are focused on building resilience to foreign influence and disinformation," close quote. Is that true or false, that CISA does not flag anything to social media organizations at all?
I believe that is true, Congressman, and I will verify that, but I believe that is true. We do.
Do you know, are you familiar with Brian Scully? Do you know who that is?
I do not, Congressman.
He was, I think, the MDM, person responsible for MDM, as you call it. And he testified about switchboarding, that CISA was engaged in switchboarding in which, for example, it was essentially an audit official to identify something on social media that they deemed to be disinformation aimed at their jurisdiction. They could forward that to CISA, and CISA would share that with the appropriate social media companies. Now, that was a quote from his testimony. That sounds like flagging to me, flagging to social media companies.
Congressman, last year we expelled or removed approximately 1.4 million people who did not have a legal basis to remain in the United States, the largest number in recent history.
Well, actually, you testified that 72,000 illegal migrants were removed in 2022. But in 2019, there were 267,000 removals. So removals are down under your administration by more than 75%. Meanwhile, in 2019, there were 458,000 border encounters, yet under your policies, we're now up to 2.3 million encounters. That's 5 times as many. So while encounters were up 5 times, removals are down by 75%. How do you account for this?
Congressman, a few points. Number one, our approach of expanding lawful pathways for people to reach the border and delivering consequences for those who arrive at our border irregularly is working. The number has dropped. You will also recall, Congressman, that last year, Title 42, the Public Health Authority, was in place, and under that authority, we could not remove individuals.
Secretary Mayorkas, on April 28, 2022, I ask you, quote, will you testify under oath right now? Do we have operational control, yes or no, end quote. You responded with, quote, yes, we do, period, end quote. I then asked, we have operational control of the borders? You responded, quote, yes, we do, period, end quote. Followed up, I said, I read to you the definition of operational control. I actually held up this chart, operational control as defined under the Secure Fence Act. Put it up for plain reading, plain as day. I put up the second part of the same statute, which defines operational control. Means the prevention of all unlawful entries in the United States, including entries by terrorists, other unlawful aliens, instruments of terrorism, narcotics, and other contraband. I said to you, do you stand by in your testimony that we have operational control in light of this definition? You responded with, quote, I do, period, end quote. Earlier, you testified I didn't give you a chance to finish. Yet you specifically, when asked and held up a statute defining exactly what operational control meant under the Secure Fence Act, you said, quote, I do. I believe that was purposeful. I believe you want the American people to believe we have operational control of the border when we very clearly do not. Less than a month later, in Homeland Security, you testified, quote, under that strict definition, this country has never had operational control. This year, House Homeland Security, then Border Patrol Chief Raul Ortiz testified before the Homeland Committee that DHS did not have operational control of the border, either by the statutory definition or not. Now that is an honest answer. In the Senate Judiciary Committee, shortly thereafter, you testified with respect to the definition of operational control, I do not use the definition that appears in the Secure Fence Act. And the Secure Fence Act provides statutorily that operational control is defined as preventing all unlawful entries in the United States, and by that definition, no administration has ever had operational control. If you will recall when you testified here in front of me when I asked that question, when you very clearly stated, we do have operational control, when presented with the actual definition of operational control, you didn't hesitate, you said, I do, and you in fact then referred back and said, I believe that my predecessors would have said the same thing. I asked Chad Wolf that question in this room, and Chad said, well, no, we didn't use that framing to say we have operational control. We're striving to achieve operational control, but you didn't do that. You looked straight at the American people, straight at me, straight at every person on this committee, and said, we have operational control. Why?
Congressman, 2 points. One, you did not let me complete my answer. Two.
Hold on. Let's give me your second point. Go ahead.
Thank you. Two, the Secure Fence Act defines operational control as not a single individual crosses the border.
I'm aware. I read it, and I read it to you, and you read it, and in fact, you said, I do. You didn't hesitate. You didn't say, I do. I need to explain what I mean by I do. You said, I do, over and over again, and here's the problem with that. This is a pattern. Did you lie another time when you said on September 24th, 2021 at a press conference, quote, we know that those images painfully conjured up the worst elements of our nation's ongoing battle against systemic racism when responding to the alleged whipping incident by the Border Patrol agents who report to you. When in fact, on October 22nd, 2022, it was reported that 2.5 hours before that press conference, Marcia Espinoza, Assistant Secretary of DHS Public Affairs, emailed you and CC'd other DHS leadership, alerting you all that the photographer who took the images did not see any whipping occur, invalidating the initial claim. And it wasn't until May of this year that you corrected the record to say, well, let me just correct you right there because actually the investigation concluded the whipping did not occur. Don Rosenberg, in this very room, testified a few weeks ago that you lie. It is a perpetual pattern, and the fact is there are real people that are impacted by that. We have now had, since you testified, we have had something like 200 people a day dying from fentanyl deaths, which would amount to 90,000 people. I showed you before, when you were here, the lost voices of fentanyl. the hundreds, the thousands of Americans that continue to die, 90,000 since you came into this committee and lied to us saying we have operational control. I yield back.
So not including the Title 42 expulsions, not including violent criminals, of those 2 million plus that you've encountered and released, how many have you told to go home?
Congressman, individuals who are released are placed in immigration enforcement proceedings under the law where they can make their claim for relief. If their claim for relief is not satisfied, they are subject to removal from the United States.
Right, subject to removal sounds very different than actually removed. So I'm not interested in the process. I'm not interested in what people are subject to. 2 million people encountered and released. Not the expulsions under Title 42, not the criminals. How many of those people have you deported?
So, Congressman, a few points. Number one.
Just how many of the people? I just want to know how many. It's just a number.
Congressman, we are dealing with a completely broken immigration
I get
system.
it. No, Mr. Secretary, I'm not going to let you burn my 5 minutes. Do you know the answer? Do you know the number of people out of that 2 million that you've removed that aren't criminals?
I do know that we have removed more aggravated felons.
Right, I'm not asking about them. I've caveated that away, because here's what I'm sort of getting and what your non-responsiveness is demonstrating. The Mayorkas doctrine is this. If you show up at the border and get released into the country, if you don't commit a specific aggravated felony, which, by the way, doesn't include a lot of assault and battery, doesn't include a lot of bad domestic violence, but if you're not one of the people who commit those crimes, you get to stay forever. Is that a fair characterization of your doctrine?
No, that is false.
Then tell me how many you're sending home.
No, that is false.
Okay, well, but you don't know the number of how many you've sent home. Here's another number. 1.2 million people today have been through your entire process. Right? They've been through what you call a removal proceeding is just an amnesty dance. Because after the 1.2 million people get an order from the judge saying that they don't have a basis to be here, you still don't remove them. Like, what's your plan to remove those people?
Congressman, that is false.
Okay, how many of them then? Just give me the number.
Congressman, in this country, there are between 11 and 12 million.
Right, but I'm asking about a subset that you won't send home. And the reason you're smirking about it and the reason you won't answer my question is because everybody gets the joke. And the sad thing is it's not just us here, it's the cartels who get the joke too. And so now what you've done to execute this Mayorkas doctrine where so long as you don't commit a crime, you get to stay here and burden our hospitals, burden our schools, burden our social services, burden our jails. You've sent the message to the cartels and then you've taken this app and you've digitized illegal immigration, and you've scaled it to the moon. Like this app that you've got everybody downloading is like the Disney Fast Pass into the country, never to be subject to actual removal, just removal proceedings, as you call them. That app doesn't do any search of their criminal history in their home country, does it?
Congressman, I disagree with everything you have said.
Well, I'm sure, but just answer the question. Does the app that you are out there promoting do any search of people's criminal history in their home country?
Congressman, Customs and Border Protection screens and vets individuals whom they encounter.
Your app, it either has the functionality to test their criminal history in their home country or it doesn't. By the way, if it did, you'd have already told me. It doesn't. And then the other epic failure of this that's empowered the cartels is that in these processing centers you've set up in other countries to just wave them all in at a rapid pace, you've had to shut them down in Nuevo Laredo because the cartels were standing outside extorting people. Isn't that right?
Congressman, that is false.
Oh, really? So why did you shut down that facility in Nuevo Laredo?
And the point of safe, orderly, and lawful pathways is to reduce the number of encounters at our southwest border.
But wait a second. You've just shifted those encounters because right now, for the first time in modern history, more people are showing up at the ports of entry than running through some bush in Yuma, Arizona. And the reason they're showing up at the ports of entry is because you've got the turnstile open. Where so long as they've gone and downloaded this app, you just let them in. I got one final question for you, and it's an important one. Is Mexico an ally in this fight against illegal immigration?
Yes, it is.
So, I mean, it's hilarious and somewhat troubling that you say that, because, like, I'm looking at the El Chapo trial where President Nieto took a $100 million bribe from the Sinaloa cartel. Do you think that the subsequent presidents following Nieto weren't offered a bribe by the cartel or didn't take the bribe?
Congressman, I disagree with everything you have said.
Right, but you can disagree all you want, but what you won't provide is any number. And when you sit there and just kind of ostensibly disagree without any facts, it shows people what the real gig is. The Mexican government is captive to the cartels. They are doing the bidding of the cartels, and based on your response today, so are you.
We have the frustrating responsibility on this committee of providing oversight of your agency, but I have to be honest and tell you, I'm not sure exactly what you do at the Department of Homeland Security other than great harm. On your watch, the data is pretty clear. We've had record levels of illegal immigration, a rapid decline in deportations, skyrocketing fentanyl deaths across our country, and the Secret Service, which is a DHS component, can't determine who left cocaine at the White House. In the middle of all this, you created this Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Agency, CISA, which is a division of DHS. And it's one of the Biden administration agencies that colluded with and coerced the social media companies to censor Americans' protected free speech online. That's specifically detailed in a 155-page court opinion that came out of the federal court in Louisiana in the landmark litigation of Missouri v. Biden. Have you read that court opinion?
Congressman, I have not, and the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency does not censor speech.
Okay, well, the court found otherwise, and it's really curious to me. Actually, it's quite alarming that you haven't read the opinion, because your agency is listed in this opinion. The federal court looked at volumes of evidence over months of litigation, and they determined, among other things, that if the allegations made by the plaintiffs, the states in this case, are true, and hold on, the preliminary injunction was granted against your agency, sir, and other Biden administration agencies, including the DOJ and FBI, the court said it involves the most massive attack against free speech in United States history. And you're telling me this opinion issued July 4th has not reached your desk? No one's briefed you on it?
Oh, I have been briefed on the Missouri litigation.
Okay, but you haven't taken the time to read it yet.
Congressman,
no, hold on. Have you read it or not?
I have read parts of it, Congressman.
Oh, parts of it. Did you read the parts where it said that this is Orwellian and dystopian and that your agency is involved in a massive cover-up of specifically conservatives' free speech online?
Congressman, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency is not involved in such conduct.
Okay, well, the court found otherwise, and you stand here under oath and you give us these answers that we know are not true because this is demonstrably untrue. I'm suggesting to you that you're saying things to us under oath that are proven by the record to be untrue. Let me ask you about this specifically. CISA was created to, we call it the Misinformation and Disinformation Subcommittee of CISA. You familiar with that? MDM, the MDM subcommittee, you're familiar with that?
Congressman, I am very well aware of the threat of disinformation emanating from adverse nations.
Are you familiar with the subcommittee? Just answer the question.
I am.
Okay. Does it still exist?
Congressman, are you speaking of the...
Does the MDM subcommittee still exist?
I would have to get back to you on that.
Okay. All right. Kind of a big deal in your agency. I'm kind of shocked that you don't know the answer to that. Can you define what misinformation is?
Congressman, misinformation is false information that is disseminated to...
Excellent. Who determines what is false?
Congressman, our focus...
No, who determines what is false in your agency? If you're going to pull something off the internet and collude with a social media platform to make sure Americans don't see it, who determines what's false?
Congressman, we don't do that.
That's not true. That is not true. That is not what the court has found. This is not a Republican talking point. This is what the documents show. We've had people testify under oath that say, and you just defined the term, you're telling me that you don't know who determines what is false?
Congressman, what we do at CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, is identify the tactics that adverse nation states use to weaponize disinformation.
Okay, what is disinformation? What is disinformation?
Disinformation is inaccurate information.
Who determines what's inaccurate? Who determines what's false? Do you understand the problem here? The reason the framers of our Constitution did not create an exception for quote-unquote false information from the First Amendment is because they didn't trust the government to determine what it is. And you have whole committees of people in your agency trying to determine what they define as false or misinformation.
That is not true.
Well, then what is true?
Please
enlighten us.
What we do is we disclose the tactics that adverse nation states are utilizing to weaponize disinformation.
No, sir. The court found specifically, it's a finding of fact that is not disputed by the government defendants, the Biden administration, your agency, the FBI, or DHS, not in the litigation. They determined you and all of your cohorts made no distinction between domestic speech and foreign speech. So don't stand there and tell me under oath that you only focused on adversaries around the world, foreign actors. That's not true.
Congressman, the Missouri case, the litigation to which you refer, is the subject of continuing litigation.
But the facts were not disputed, and I so regret that I'm out of time. I hope I get some more yielded. I yield back.
If I wanted to know where these NGOs are sending illegals that are coming across that they're helping facilitate with financial support, is that a fair ask? Is that something the American people should know, where these folks are going?
Congressman, you are mischaracterizing.
No, I'm not characterizing anything. I'm asking a question. Should the American people, should we know where they're being sent when they're entered into these organizations that are providing the assistance? Is that a fair ask?
Congressman, your question misstates the underlying facts. If I can explain what occurs.
Well, let me explain to you what occurred. I have requested for years, over 2 years, this information from Homeland. I've requested this information from Catholic Charities, Jewish Family Services, Lutheran Immigration and Refugee Services, FEMA, 3 different airlines, and even hotels. Each request has gone unanswered. And it seems to me that if our taxpayer dollars are being used to fund an operation whereby we're encouraging illegal immigration, we're encouraging, through funding these organizations, people to make these deadly treks across our southern border, it seems to me that we should be able to get some answers to questions.
Are you aware of how many illegals have been encountered at our border and how many known gotaways have escaped into America? And I just want the numbers.
Congressman, you speak of the Southwest.
Sir, I just want the numbers.
And the challenge of migration that we face.
Thank you. I appreciate your answer. It's 5.6 million illegal alien encounters and 1.5 million known gotaways. How about the number of aliens on the terrorist screening database who have been caught? Not the ones who haven't been caught, but the ones who have been caught just in the last 9 months. Do you know that number?
I'm very pleased to provide that to you.
I do. It's 140. Thank you. How about the number unaccompanied minors processed in FY23? Do you know that number?
Similarly, Congressman, I'd be very pleased.
Thank you. I know that number myself. It's 152,000. We have seen a continuous surge of fentanyl coming from China, being distributed by Mexican drug cartels and destroying countless American lives. Are you aware of how many Americans died? How many Americans died in 2021 at the hands of fentanyl?
I am aware of those numbers, Congressman.
71,000. 71,000 human souls.
Sheriff Mark Daniels, under questioning here a few months ago before this committee, Cochise County down on the border of Arizona, he said the open border has led to a significant increase in the amount of fentanyl coming into this country. Do you agree with his assessment?
Congressman, we have taken it to the cartels.
Do you agree with his assessment? He said the amount of fentanyl has went up significantly as a result of the open borders policy implemented by this administration January 20th of 2021. Is he lying to us? Did Sheriff Daniels lie to us?
Congressman, I respectfully disagree with Sheriff Daniels, whom I know well.
So Sheriff Daniels is lying to us?
That is not what I said, Congressman, and let me...
Someone's not telling the truth here, Mr. Secretary. Someone's not telling the truth. It's either Daniels or it's you.
Congressman, we have interdicted more fentanyl at the ports of entry than in the prior administration.
Mr. Chairman, I'll go to close here.
MAGA Republican extremists want to sell us on an apocalyptic fantasy. They want the American people to believe that the border is out of control, that drugs are flowing in freely, that September 11th style terrorists are infiltrating with impunity, and that Latino immigrants are coming to rape, rob, and murder our families. But in reality, the greatest threat facing our homeland is white nationalist ideology that lies beneath such rhetoric.
Can you define malinformation for us?
Congressman, we're dealing with false information that is used for a particular purpose.
Isn't malinformation actually true information that may be inconvenient to the establishment orthodoxy?
I'm sorry, Congressman.
Isn't malinformation a made-up word that refers to information that's actually true but just inconvenient to the government narrative?
That is not true, Congressman.
Let me ask you this. You said that the proliferation of false or misleading narratives sow discord and undermine public trust in U.S. government institutions. Is it illegal to undermine public trust in U.S. government institutions?
Congressman, we become involved because we believe in the First Amendment right and we have safeguards to protect it. We actually have a statutorily created Office for Civil Rights and Civil Liberties. We become involved not with respect to a particular ideology. We are ideology neutral, but it's the connectivity to violence.
Isn't larger government an ideology, the bigger government? Let me ask you my original question, is it illegal to undermine public trust in U.S. government institutions?
Congressman, we understand First Amendment principles. We embrace and protect them. Individuals can espouse whatever ideology they believe in.
And so let me ask you the question, if you just answer it directly. Is it illegal to undermine public trust in U.S. government institutions? Isn't that, in fact, what we're doing here today? When we point out that you've released 1 million or 2 million people into this country without trying to deport them? I mean, are we, in fact, undermining trust in your institution? Aren't we doing that? And isn't that actually healthy when we point that out?
Congressman, may I share with you what the Department of Homeland Security does with respect to ideologies?
I need to ask you another question since you haven't answered any of these yet. You say that there is widespread online proliferation of false or misleading narratives regarding COVID-19. Is the claim that natural immunity is real, is that a false or misleading online narrative?
Congressman, we do not evaluate particular ideologies or particular narratives.
How about the claim that vaccines don't stop the spread of the virus? Was that a false or misleading COVID narrative?
Congressman, what we do is we are involved when there's a connectivity between an ideology, whatever that ideology.
I'm not talking about ideology, I'm talking about COVID-19. Is the notion that masks were ineffective at stopping transmission, was that a false or misleading narrative?
Congressman, allow me to repeat. What we get engaged in is a connectivity to violence. It is our responsibility to prevent violence from occurring. We work very closely.
All right, I'm just saying, I want you to give me an example of a false or misleading narrative that encouraged violence. That you say that that grievances associated with these themes inspired violent extremist attacks during 2021. Did hydroxychloroquine, did that inspire violent extremist attacks? What are you talking about in this document when you say that false or misleading narratives about COVID-19 inspired violent extremist attacks during 2021? Can you give us a single example? I've given you some questions. Was it the narrative that this may have leaked from a lab in China? Was that the thing? And if so, what did it inspire? What's the violence?
Congressman, would you like an example?
Yeah.
Yeah. COVID-19 is caused by 5G cell towers, an attack on a cell tower. That attack on a cell tower triggers the involvement of the Department of Homeland Security. That is an example. It is the connectivity to violence. We do not condone
you
violence.
think COVID-19 caused attacks on cell towers? I think you're chasing ridiculous things.
40 illegal aliens you've encountered who are on the terrorist watch list. Again, this is Mr. Ice's question earlier in the day. What is the status of those 140 individuals?
First of all, let me allow the record to reflect that I'm not smiling, nor have I smiled.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, will you repeat your question, please?
The 140 individuals who've been encountered on the border who are on the terrorist watch list, what's the status of those individuals?
I believe that question already has been posed, and I mentioned to the chairman that we will provide that data to you.
Have any of them been released, I guess is another way of framing that.
Mr. Chairman, let me say this. Individuals who pose a threat to public safety or national security are detained pending their removal.
Well, that's not what the Inspector General said. He said CBP released a migrant on the terrorist watch list and ICE faced information sharing challenges planning and conducting the arrest. This is from Mr. Kufari, the Inspector General of DHS. You disagree with Mr. Kufari?
We respectfully do.
I think it's time for this country to take back our country. We need to tell the folks at the Pentagon they work for us. Dadgummit, we don't work for them.